An electric car is not a regular car. No, it's very, very different. Well, slightly different in a couple of ways. But what's more different than anything is that people have these misconceptions about what it actually is, how it works, and how it doesn't work. And we're going to try and clear some of those up. Specifically, can they work in the cold? In the winter, it'll just never work, you guys. Haven't you heard? Well, I've heard a number of things, but I figured I'd bring on some people who know a little bit more about operating an electric vehicle in the very cold. We've got John from Tech Geek Tesla and Jim, the Iowa Tesla guy, joining us today. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. Well, it is getting into the new year. I hope we all have our resolutions. Mine is 4K. No, I'm sticking with 1080. It's just better that way. You do not want more clarity for some things, I assure you. So my first question is, and I'll start with John, how long, how many years, how many miles have you driven an EV in the cold?
5 years now going on, 5 years. So it's been quite a bit of a journey here since 2019.
Yeah. And you've driven a lot of miles. You've done road trips. You've done regular trips around your state and your tri-state area, I imagine. Would you say more than 10,000, 20,000 miles of winter driving?
Definitely, I'd say about 20,000 miles around there.
How about you, Jim?
I've been owning a Tesla for 4 years now, a little over 4 years, and I've got over 70,000 miles between my two cars. And because, winter here in Iowa lasts about 8 months, I would say that about 30 to 40,000 of those were winter driving. But all seriousness, a good chunk of it is.
Absolutely. Certainly more than 20,000, but maybe 30 to
Certainly.
40. Yeah.
Could be.
So we've got some questions we need to address. The first is range hit. How bad's the range hit? John, you want to go first on that?
Sure. So my Model 3 is a long-range rear-wheel drive car, and it has 325 miles, the EPA rated range, and that is not realistic. I've maybe maximum gotten 291 around there, listed at least. In the winter, if it's below zero, or we're talking, minus 10 outside, you're going to get a range hit, and that it is definitely noticeable. However, you can still drive for 3 hours, I'd say, without needing to charge. And that's, again, assuming that you start at 100%. But it's more than enough. I'd say you'd get maybe a 30 to 40% range hit overall in extreme sub-zero temps.
Okay, Jim?
I would say it kind of depends on the length of your drive. If you're a type of person that has a rather short commute in the wintertime and you don't have a chance to precondition in your garage or whatever, you're going to see a pretty significant range hit. But as the battery gets warmed up, especially if you're road tripping in the winter, and superchargers are really great at warming up batteries while you're charging. Once the car kind of hits an equilibrium, I'm thinking you're probably going to be about 20, max 25% for long drives, but it could be substantial for short drives. But I also want to put a little asterisk on that too, because everyone wants to compare EVs to gas cars. And because most people don't have, a 0 to 100% gas gauge, they don't really pay much attention. But gas cars also take a range hit in the wintertime as well, and that can be substantial. And the whole short drive versus long drive in gas cars is exactly the same. So the way that I like to explain it is that EVs, yes, there is a range hit in the winter, but there are in gas cars too. It's all pretty much the same.
The other thing worth noting, so I did a drive down to San Jose recently, which took me through the mountains in December, and my drive was cold. I did have a bit of a range hit, maybe 5% over usual, maybe even 10%, because it was well below freezing for a good chunk of the drive. But you know what a gas car gets that an EV doesn't is an altitude hit, because it struggles to mix properly. It's not getting enough air. It can't breathe. Your gas car causes and is asthmatic. So that's something worth remembering as well. So we're talking about some of the downsides. Let's talk about tires. I know, John, you've had some experience with all-season tires that have done very well for you. Can you share that?
I have. So the Lexani high-performance tires, which are manufactured out of Korea, have performed really, really well for me. And they're very low cost. And a lot of people don't realize you don't need to get the extremely expensive tires with a Tesla. And these, I've gotten 50,000 miles out of my first set. So my original OEM tires, I only was able to get 40,000 miles out of those, but 50,000 out of my first set. And you have to keep in mind, these were very, very cheap, including the installation for 4 tires at a discount tire, $380 total for 4 tires. It's absolutely incredible. You can have them shipped to your home and then installed at a service at a discount tire for a really decent price. I think it was $116 for the installation, but it's the Lexani High Performance, the LXUHP, that have performed really well for me. And again, you don't need a winter tire for as long as you're familiar with the physics and you've driven in the winter. You really don't need to max out your winter tire performance.
Jim, did you have any feedback on tires before I get to the traction question itself?
Well, yeah, I went the other direction. First off, the all season weather tires that come, the Continentals that come with the Tesla standard wheels, are actually really good, in my opinion, in the winter. They're not great, but they're really good. And I'll also put a point in this because it likely gets a lot of feedback, which is there's a group of people that say you have to have dedicated winter tires, and there's a group of people that say you can get by with all season. I'm an all season guy. I grew up in Iowa. I lived my entire life in Iowa. I've learned how to drive in Iowa. I'm not discounting anybody against getting winter tires. If that makes you feel more comfortable, 100% do it. But that's just not me. Once my tires wore out, the standard tires wore out, I went with the Michelin Cross Climate 2s, and they're pricey. But they are also absolute monsters in the wintertime as far as traction.
That's great. I had a friend in high school who couldn't afford a second set of tires. So when his went bald, he did get his studded tires for the winter. And when spring came, he used pliers to remove the studs. So
How you do it?
that is how he did it. Now, here's something a lot of folks don't know. If you're stuck in the snow, you can rock your car, rock it gently, and get your mother-in-law out to yell at you from the outside, because that feedback definitely helps. If only there was a better way to get unstuck from the snow. Do you guys have any suggestions?
Well, you can tap the little screen that says, I think, slip start, and generally helps you out.
Now, that's a neat feature a lot of people don't know exists. There's, I think, 2 settings. There's one that's just a little slippery and one that's super slippery. And I forget what the other one's called right now. But what does it do? Do you know? I don't know.
I'll be full admit, I haven't really had a need to use it, just because this thing is just so great in the wintertime. And the weight of the vehicle Teslas are heavy cars compared to gas cars, and that weight in conjunction with tires, wider tires, helps the car out. And couple that with the electronics for traction control and its inability to spin the tires. Generally, you don't need to use it, but if you do, they have the ability, and it does allow the wheels to slip and move, and it senses to try to get you unlodged and get you going if you ever do get in a situation when you're stuck.
Yeah, and I don't know how it works either, which means it's magic. That's just, I assume that's right. Now, wouldn't it be great if somebody had made a video where they went out in the snow and tried to break the traction control and found that it didn't break? And by the way, do I have permission to put that on screen now?
Sure.
Thank you. It's a wonderful video. Jim went out and to a parking lot and just would it would just go. It would just go. And for those of us who have driven Teslas in the snow, we know that that's the experience. But this is so unlike any other car that we've ever had, that I've ever had. Now, another question I've gotten that I have had viewers request that we address is corrosion. How do the cars hold up to the horrible salts that go on some of the roads in the Midwest? Any feedback on that yet?
Well, you have to get the underbody protection package from Tesla. That really helps out in the wintertime. In all seriousness, I'm joking. They don't offer it. But no, I've had absolutely zero issue. Here in Iowa, they use a combination of sand and salt. I've never had an issue.
Are they too new for us to know how they're going to hold up? Is that what's going on?
You would think you would see signs, but
yeah, I have to jump in and comment there because,
please.
Okay. So first of all, I think it's important because there is no winter protection package like you mentioned, Jim.
Right.
I love that one, but I was like, no, that's not right. Mud flaps, they don't come with mud flaps, so you can get them installed in the aftermarket. Now, you do have to be careful, especially if it's a new car. You don't want the mud flaps damaging the paint, so you can kind of put some protection film around the exterior of the car before you install them. But definitely recommend that. That will prevent all the slush and the salt and corrosion materials from entering the body of the car. Um, I will say, though, the front upper control arms on some of the earlier Teslas have had some issues as far as the quality goes. So if you're unfamiliar with the front upper control arms, it's basically the portions that allow your suspension to go up and down. And it looks like a little horseshoe, essentially. And there's a couple of bearings in there and bushings, and they can go bad with corrosion. Version J of the front upper control arms is the version that fixed it. So I have had my FUCAs replaced twice now. And the second time they were replaced is when they got that version corrected.
Well, look at that. That's fascinating. So I would say that we haven't seen enough data for some of corrosion issues because the S and X were aluminum. Those are not going to have the same kind of issues. Cybertruck, I'm not worried. There's very little on it that isn't stainless or aluminum. But with 3s and Ys, I think they would be subject to the same rules of corrosion that you would see from any manufacturer. They will, I assume, rust out at some point with enough salt on the roads. So these are all the downsides. Let's talk about some upsides. It's winter, it's cold. What else can your Tesla do apart from having excellent traction control, apart from having slip start? Any benefits that is a little bit unique that you might have to share?
Yeah,
Jim,
absolutely.
Jim created an awesome video on this, by the way. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, to me, the number one killer feature in the wintertime is that you don't have to go out and start up your car and warm it up. Whether it be in your garage or in your work parking lot, you literally open up the Tesla app and you tap a button and your car is heating up. And if you want to turn on the seat heaters and the steering wheel heater, it's all right there from the app. And the car will even give you a push notification saying it's all toasty warm in there. You're ready to go. That's amazing.
Yeah. And that is fantastic. If we're just running into the store for a minute and it is at or near freezing, we will just use the keep feature so that it just stays toasty while we're in the store. It's only going to be a few minutes. And if we need to, if we're somewhere and it's time to head out, we'll just preheat the car. I don't mind being in a freezing car, but and I know this is crazy, but I love my family and I want them to be happy and comfortable. So that is a feature that we use all the time. And I know that there are gasoline cars that offer this. I rented a Ford Explorer and used the remote start once because we were in Las Vegas and the cabin will get to a good 150. And it was a black car with a black interior. So we turned on the air conditioning before we came out. And I thought, wow, if this was my car, I would never use this feature. Is it going to catch on fire? Am I going to run out of gas? Am I going to overheat? I don't know. And I don't wish to find out. Now, there was a video, there was a concern within, I don't know, I think it was this winter, might have been last winter, where cars are getting stuck on the highway because of a blizzard that came in. And good thing you were in a gas car, because how would you stay warm in an electric car? Hey, if you were to be in freezing temps and put it in camp mode, which is effectively what you're doing in a blizzard, in a snowbank, how long would your battery last?
Well, it'll last quite a bit of time. And I think the issue that you were referring to that happened was a bit of a freak event, and it happened in Chicago area. And John could probably talk about it a little bit more, but by and large, it happened to the people that didn't have the ability to charge at home. It's an urban environment, and they're parked on the streets, and the car is trying to heat the battery and keep it usable, and they just let it drain until it was dead.
No. So that was a separate issue. We talked about that last year. I had you and I think Brian Reeby on to discuss it. But no, what I mean is if there was cars that were stuck on the highway in snowdrifts, not electric cars. None of them were electric. And so another channel went out and said, all right, I'm going to go camp overnight in my car in freezing temps.
Yep.
And when he came out and when he woke up in the morning, I think he'd gone through 10% of his battery, something that would lead you to the understanding that you could last for days at
Yeah,
at room temperature
yeah,
without
much
risk
longer than
of
a gas car. Mhm.
yeah, without risk of asphyxiation. So
Yeah.
that's, it depends what you're into, I suppose. Are there any other upsides or downsides of an EV in the winter that we're failing to realize?
I would say, so I have about 100,000 miles on my Model 3, and it has the lithium ion technology. It's not the LFP. But generally speaking, speed is your biggest, issue driving in the winter, because the faster you go, the more you burn up the energy in the battery. So as long as you're limiting the speed, you're going to be okay. Now, I can count on one hand with one finger the number of times that I've had to reduce my speed to accommodate winter driving. The thing is, you just need to plan ahead, and that's all it comes down to, really. And now, if you live in an apartment, let's say, and you don't have charging available while your car is parked, when you do warm up your car, it's going to use a little bit of extra energy, but that's going to help overall for the trip that you're embarking on. And that
Mhm,
I definitely encourage doing that, because that's better for the battery chemistry to have
mhm.
it warm. And then you also notice in the winter, when you are arriving at a destination for a supercharger, it will start pre-warming the battery. And that happens even in the summer, but much more so during the winters. So just being aware and planning ahead would be my biggest tips for winter driving.
There was a new feature added this week. I don't know if you saw it. If you have a rear wheel drive LFP battery, it will, when you plug into a charger in weather that's very cold, because the battery can only accept a certain amount of juice, it'll accept more than that with the excess juice going just to heating the battery. Because the battery is the limiting factor on that, so it can only take so much juice, but it can take more to heat the battery, get you back on your way more quickly. These Tesla engineers, they absolutely think of everything, and every time they're able to speed up the charging procedure, it means fewer chargers they will need to build in the future. So it's clever all around. So, guys, in the comments, what did we miss? What did we misunderstand? Leave it. Comments are at this time optional. We'll review it again in the future, see if we need to reinstate mandatory comments. You guys have been doing all right, so I appreciate that. Everybody else, like, subscribe. Head on over to these two channels for these two gentlemen. Check them out. They will be in the description below. And everybody else, subscribe, do what you do. Stay tuned, stay juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots when it thaws.